Hello there, welcome to this Advective weather video. Today we have a potentially historic but definitely rare February Derecho event on the cards for the Central Plains, primarily Oklahoma, but starting in Texas, moving all the way through Oklahoma into Missouri and impacting parts of Kansas and Arkansas as well. It is forecast to be powerful, with a moderate 4 out of 5 risk in place by the Storm Prediction Center. They say that multiple parts of Oklahoma will receive 80 to 110 mile per hour wind gusts, which is equivalent to an EF1 to low-end EF2 tornado. Now you think about the sort of damage that those can cause, and you realize that these gusts will be over a larger area than a typical tornado, and you start to realize that this could be a very substantial and impactful event, and at a very unusual time of year. Thankfully, that means there aren't leaves on the trees, so there's likely to be fewer trees down than there would be if this event happened in the late spring or summer or early autumn, but there is still the potential for substantial damage to buildings, and obviously to any vehicles that are traveling when this line comes through. High-sided vehicles are very likely to be blown off the road, potentially for a considerable distance if the strongest gusts impact you. And that's not even taking into account the fact that there is a significant tornado potential today as well. Initially, we're going to see supercells in the Texas Panhandle moving into western Oklahoma. These will have the potential to produce strong to intense EF2 plus EF3 tornadoes. Small possibility that they could even become violent for a time, but hopefully, given that there's not the most population out there, few and far between for the towns and cities, if there are any significant tornadoes from these supercells, we hope that they stay away from any people. But you can never be certain, and there are towns out there that have been impacted by substantial tornadoes before. Hopefully today is not a day where we see that happening. Regardless of the first event and how the tornadoes fare there, once the supercells merge and we get our derecho moving through Oklahoma, Kansas, and into Missouri and Arkansas, QLCS tornadoes that spin up along the line are likely and expected, and these may be strong EF2 plus as well. They won't last as long as the supercell tornadoes, but if one touches down in the middle of, say, Norman, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Springfield, you could see a substantial impact, and there is the potential for loss of life if any of these tornadoes, or indeed the EF2 equivalent wind gusts, impact mobile homes that are very susceptible to wind damage. Now, moving on to the setup, you can see a large area in the Central Plains where the severe weather is happening today, being driven by that cold front pushing in from the west that's providing strong forcing and is going to be moving at quite a pace. This whole event is going to be over in around 12 hours from the Texas Panhandle all the way to eastern Missouri, potentially into Illinois. And there is a severe threat tomorrow, a low-end severe threat, slight risk out of 5 for the Midwest, as this line may reinvigorate, re-strengthen somewhat tomorrow, but it's currently not expected to be anywhere near as substantial as today's event. Now here's the official forecast. You can see the full risk area. Slight risk just clips Dallas-Fort Worth. There may be some significant wind gusts down there, but it's not expected. Still, you need to be aware anywhere in northern Texas, all the way to the Kansas-Nebraska border, really, that you could have severe thunderstorm warnings issued later today. And if any of these areas go under a severe thunderstorm watch, you need to be prepared for this damaging and dangerous line of winds moving towards your location and be prepared to take the necessary action. And again, if you're in a mobile home, you need to treat this line of storms as if it is a tornado moving directly for your location, because the winds could be as strong as an EF2 tornado in some locations. Now, going on to the tornado outlook, you can see that the strongest tornadoes are expected from the far eastern Texas Panhandle through to Oklahoma City Metro, actually getting into the far western part of the metro, but all of southwestern Oklahoma under the gun for tornadic supercells with the potential for EF2, EF3, maybe even EF4 violent tornadoes. SPC specifically said EF2 to EF3 in their outlook. That's what's most likely from one or more of these supercells. But as you can see, that 5% risk goes all the way into Missouri, and that's where potentially significant tornadoes are possible anywhere within the line. 2% weaker tornadoes possible almost into Illinois, and that may be expanded in later outlooks if it seems that the line is going to persist farther east than currently forecast. Moving on to the wind threat. An exceptional wind threat today. Very large 45 hatched risk. There is the potential for this to be upgraded to a 60% hatched risk, which would be a high risk. We haven't seen a high risk for wind in some times, and it almost seems like the Storm Prediction Center doesn't issue high risks for wind anymore. But we'll see what they do with the next 2 outlooks. Most likely, if it does get upgraded, it would probably be at the 20 UTC outlook. That's going to be about an hour after this video comes out. We'll be live in a few hours after this video, covering this event as it unfolds. But you can see that significant wind is possible almost as soon as the event starts in the central Texas Panhandle, all the way through to central Missouri. And again, these risks may be expanded farther east as the event goes on if the line appears to be doing better than expected, or if model guidance changes. And there is a hail risk, primarily to the west part of the risk, with those supercells capable of producing substantial hail, maybe 1 up to 2 inches in diameter. And of course, that can break car windshields, come through the roof of a house. You want to be aware that this is an additional threat today. Here's the weather model. HRRR, the latest run at the time of making this video. You can see those storms fire, powerful almost from the off, and they go straight into Oklahoma, wasting no time, shooting across the entire part of that state, producing hurricane force winds across most, if not all, of central Oklahoma and parts of Kansas before moving into Missouri and Arkansas. And you can see there is that little part that digs down into Texas. It's uncertain whether this will reach severe limits, but for a time there could be severe thunderstorm warnings south of the Red River as well as north. Looking in particular at those initial supercells, you can see that they cover the entire length of the Texas Panhandle and potentially go into Kansas for a time. Farther north they are, the less likely they are to produce tornadoes, but that's not to say that they can't produce tornadoes even up in Kansas. There is the low possibility that a storm will manage to get to the surface and produce a significant tornado even into Kansas, but anywhere in Oklahoma especially, these supercells are capable of producing dangerous and damaging tornadoes. If you are under a tornado warning today, you need to seek shelter. Now, thunderstorm watches will be issued, potentially PDS, severe thunderstorm watches, with this is expected to be a high-end derecho event. And these will be upgraded to thunderstorm warnings as the line is approaching your area. When you go under a watch, you need to be aware that the threat is happening in the next several hours and be prepared to move to a safe place. If you're in a mobile home, it's advisable that you move to shelter well in advance before the warning is issued so that you don't have to scramble at the last minute, because this line will be moving faster than you can drive, potentially 60 miles an hour or faster at the speed it's moving, and within that, winds in excess of 100 miles an hour. You do not want to be caught traveling to your shelter when that line hits you, so it's best to be near or in your place of shelter before the warning is issued. But as soon as that warning is issued for your location, especially in Oklahoma, it is time to take shelter immediately to protect yourselves and others. Now with these tornadoes, this is very used to tornadoes, perhaps not this time of year, but supercells can produce violent tornadoes at any time of the year in Oklahoma. Every month has seen them, unfortunately. You know what to do, hopefully. Have your safe place identified and ahead of time. Have a way to receive warnings, radio, phone, television, internet. And once that warning is issued, please take it seriously and seek shelter. Now, here is something put out today by National Weather Service Norman, Oklahoma. This is a comparison between tornado damage and straight-line wind damage. And the impacts are exactly the same. Potentially worse for the wind damage because it will be spread over a larger area, whereas the tornado damage tends to be more focused to a small corridor where the center of the tornado tracks. The buildings get affected the same way by either, and the storms certainly don't care what they're doing because they're just producing these winds. Don't ignore the warnings. They are as dangerous as tornado warnings today, and by taking action you could save your life or the lives of others. And of course, after the storm comes through, be careful. Things may collapse after the storm passes for the first hour or two, and make sure other people around you are safe once you have confirmed you and your immediate family are safe. Now, before we move on to the winter weather, we have this to look at for Thursday. Before we've even gotten through today's event, another severe outbreak is on the table. Widespread severe outbreak possible on Thursday. That's the wording exactly from the Storm Prediction Center. 30% risk, which is equivalent to an enhanced risk already in place from Texas through to Alabama. That's a large area. Damaging winds, tornadoes, and severe hail all expected already 5 days away. Unfortunately, it's time to start preparing for another potentially major outbreak in the Deep South. We'll have more on this in the coming days as we get closer. Now, on to the winter weather. Very active pattern at the moment, and time waits for no one, including these western storms. 4 to 6 foot of snow likely in the high Sierra, potentially blizzard conditions down to 2,000 foot above sea level through the west coast states. If you are traveling through the mountain passes, even above 1,000 foot, be prepared for winter conditions that rapidly change and make travel impossible. You do not want to be caught out without sufficient supplies if your car becomes trapped in drifting snow, especially where we'll see heavy snow rates in excess of 2 inches per hour and high winds. Travel will be impossible for a time through the higher routes, and if you have to travel, it's advisable that you don't, but if you have no other option, then you need to have the necessary equipment to get through safely. You need to have a way to stay warm. You need to have sufficient clothes. You need to have a way to contact emergency services if you need rescuing. And you should have a way to try and free your vehicle if you become trapped in a small amount of snow before it becomes impossible to escape, such as a shovel, snow chains, equipment like that. Please have those supplies with you if you are heading into the mountains, but if at all possible, stay out of them until the storm passes. Now, looking at the storm on the wide-scale NAM model, you can see multiple waves of snow crashing into the west coast of the United States, as well as that storm system, very impressive. After it produces the derecho, moves into the Midwest and produces a swath of snow from the Dakotas through to the US East Coast, and unfortunately some freezing rain possible for a time near the Canadian border. Been plenty of winter weather in this part of the world recent days. This is just going to add to those totals, much of which may not have melted farther north after that historic blizzard that we saw just a few days ago. But this could be the first appreciable snowfall for the US East Coast all winter for some parts. Of course, you need to take the regular actions. There are winter storm watches in place. In fact, why don't we go on to the warnings? You can see winter storm watches in effect for a small part of the northeast US, winter storm warning, winter storm watches, and winter weather advisories in effect for parts of the Midwest, and blizzard warnings and winter storm warnings in effect for much of the western United States, except for the coastal regions of central and southern California. If you're in a blizzard warning, it's advised not to travel at all. And again, that threshold is around 2,000 foot, potential for some snow for a time below 2,000 foot, but above 2,000 feet, very likely that routes will become impassable for a time, if not for days, as you head higher up. Now, that pink in Texas is not a winter storm warning, it is a red flag warning. Before these storms arrive, or potentially just after the storms arrive, there is unfortunately the potential for some fire in the western part of the Texas Panhandle. If you do have a fire near you, you will be given warning by the local authorities. Make sure you have a way to receive those warnings and just pay attention in case a fire unfortunately starts. And a widespread wind advisory and high wind warnings in effect for much of the southern and east central United States with this powerful system moving through. And here are the warnings from National Weather Service, of course, 3 levels: advisory, storm warning, and blizzard warning. Travel difficulties expected with the winter weather advisories, that's even to low levels such as Seattle. Winter storm warning, considerable travel problems, advisable not to travel if at all possible. Blizzard warning, the action from the National Weather Service is do not travel, full stop. You are very likely to become trapped, and the odds of you reaching your destination are minimal. And once again, that is routes above 2,000 foot in the California mountains. After the storm, some places may lose power if they have power at the moment. Of course, as always, you want to be careful with your heat sources. You want to keep them away from children and pets so they don't get knocked over. You want to keep fire risk to a minimum. If you're using a portable generator, practice safety. Keep it away from the house to prevent the fumes it gives off from coming inside and causing carbon monoxide poisoning. And once you are safe, if you have any neighbours nearby, please check on them as well. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you're staying safe, whether you're being affected by the potentially historic derecho in Oklahoma and neighbouring states, or if you're being impacted by the winter weather in the west coast or northern parts of the US. We will be live, as I said, in a few hours to cover this derecho event, as well as the tornadoes beforehand. And if you have any questions before that, you're welcome to join us on Discord, send us a ping, and we will respond as soon as we can. Thank you very much, and stay safe.